When did you get your first flying V guitar?
The first one was around about, I think about 75 is what I think. I actually thought it was earlier than that, but I've recently met up with the guy that actually sold me the guitar in Birmingham, you know, all those years ago, and he reckons it was about 1975. And that was obviously I would say it's my flagship guitar, because it's a 1967 thereabouts, and yeah, I'm extremely proud to be an owner, because I've since found out they made about 111 of those guitars, I think.
How many?
111. I've actually got the Gibson records of the manufacturer. They started manufacturing that one. Obviously, I've become a little bit of a historian, being a V owner all of these years. Obviously, the 58 model, you know, which is obviously very expensive now and well sought after by a lot of people. You know, that production was around about the 500 mark, I believe, you know. As was the Medallion V, the 1970 version, was a run of about 500. But the 67 one, they did less numbers. They started production sometime in 66. I think they made just a few, half a dozen in 66. Throughout 67 is what I learned. And so I was extremely lucky to come across the guitar second-hand in a shop in the middle of Birmingham. Just so happened to spot the guitar. Even then, it was expensive at £500. But immediately I thought to myself, I really do need this guitar. And there is a story. I've since run into Michael Schenker a few times over the years. And Michael actually made the journey up, I believe, from, I think UFO played in Birmingham, I think on the Sunday. But I think that Michael saw the guitar in the shop, I think something like that. They were playing Birmingham Odeon, I think. And but he came up a couple of days later, you know, with the intention of acquiring the guitar. But I'd been in there the day before, and every time I see Michael, he always goes, KK, you have my guitar. And I go, no, Michael, it's mine. So that's kind of the cute story behind that. Because they were pretty, and still are, rare instruments, of course.
That's funny you mentioned that you had your first V guitar was from 67.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually the year that you started playing guitar, wasn't it?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah, you started at the age of 16.
16, that's correct, yeah. Yeah.
So that's a coincidence or what?
Maybe, who knows?
Maybe, perhaps.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, it's could be. But as I say, with that particular instrument, obviously, I now look at old archive photographs and things, and I saw obviously Jimi Hendrix had one. Mm-hmm. You know, I think Andy Powell had one from Wishbone Ash. Kim Simmons from Savoy Brown. I think Dave Davies from the Kinks. I think Brian Jones might have had one, but I'm not sure. But, you know, selected people probably had the guitars when they were brand new, you know.
The King was one of the first guys who got the 58 model.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was a good guy.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. I saw the picture with the Korean.
Yeah.
The first one they made.
Yeah, I saw him play it in the 60s, I think it was. Yeah, all the B.B. King, Albert King, and, you know, all the Kings used to come to England, and as they did other countries. So it was great to see those guys play the Flying V. But it was an acquired taste, I think it's fair to say. Lots of guys picked them up, and suddenly it just seemed just to have that shape just kind of seemed strange to them. But definitely for me, I think that it was definitely something that was unique and something that was futuristic. It was more the future. You know, I think it's like, so it's one of those things like contemporary architecture or, you know, modern art, and, you know, but it is kind of the future, you know. And I think that, to me, it always did epitomise. I probably didn't know at the time that the V was going to become the mainstay, you know, in the metal world. You know, the mainstay design, you know. But certainly has, I think everybody would agree, if there is a metal axe anywhere, it's usually pretty pointed and in a more aggressive. And in actual fact, my guitars became probably more that way over the years, more pointed, you know, just a bit more aggressive looking.
Who has inspired you as a guitar player and a musician?
Without a doubt, Hendrix was the main one, my sole inspiration. The first time I saw him, I think in '67, something like that, tour in the UK. A tour went through here with Hendrix was headlining with on the same bill one night was Pink Floyd, and The Move, The Nice, I think, you know, about 6 or 7 bands. But Hendrix headlined, and it was just an incredible experience, and that kind of always, forever, ever stayed with me. You know, I just had an old beat-up acoustic then. I think never thought I'd see myself as a guitar player when I first saw that, but it certainly, as time went on and I developed as a guitar player, everything that Hendrix brought, you know, brought along was totally everything that inspired me going forward. Because in Hendrix, I actually saw, undoubtedly, everything that Hendrix did had elements of the future in it. There's absolutely no doubt. It was the first time I experienced with my ears something that I could identify as heavy metal today, you know, with the song compositions and the content of the composition. You know, it really, really, obviously, but Hendrix, you know, he inspired an awful lot of guitar players in the world, but not too many actually became what I've heard some people call sons of Hendrix in the world. And I guess people, you know, like me, Robin Trower, and so many players, certainly Stevie Ray, you know, elements of Hendrix, and also Frank Marino. Definitely, you'd have to say that these guys, you know, all of us and myself, even though I was determined not to ever, you know, want to be, you know, Hendrix to me was so much of an icon that, you know, that it would be silly and stupid to try and copy him, you know, but to an extent, I think guitar players, and I'm happy that they did, you know, great players that had the inspiration and showed their appreciation, whether it was with the clothes or through the playing or just, you know, the Strat. But I myself wanted to find a niche, you know, but taking those wonderful ingredients that Hendrix had and his playing and his persona and everything about him, but to try to take that into a place that people hadn't gone before. That I thought that was very, very important, you know.
What do you think makes the V guitar so special?
I think
I mean,
that
you have signature V's.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 I think that I think, in all honesty, there's so many wonderful guitars in the world, and there are. But the Flying V, to me now, I think, as much as it was what could be described as the bastard son, you know, when it first appeared, you know, only for the select brave few, you know, that wanted to take it on. It's developed from that, you know, and I can associate it maybe with my own life as an individual, you know, growing up, coming from the background that I did. Things were tough, you know, but you eventually come through, and you know, and you get some admiration, you know, and respect. And the Flying V has done that. And hopefully I've done that as an individual, as lots of people in the world, you know, like me, have struggled to, through life, you know. Certainly for the first, you know, close on 30 years, it was pretty tough. It comes good, you know, and then you can integrate into the world and society and hold your head up high. And that's certainly what I think the Flying V has achieved, certainly as a design.
What about your own Flying V design? What's special about that? Is it the pickups? Is it the fret? Is it the headstock?
Well, I think the thing is, obviously, and I think a lot of guitar players out there that play, you know, guitars from the 50s, 60s, you know, the guitars become potentially fragile. They have a lot of value. The more a known guitar player plays a guitar, you know, they can become really quite valuable. But to the individual, they're extremely valuable because it's been a part of your evolution in the music industry. And so when Hamer first came to me in the early 80s with an idea to replace the Flying Vs with something that was played really well, it made sense because then I could treat that instrument. That I didn't have that personal affection. It wasn't like a child of mine, you know, that had been with me through my life. You know, I could treat these instruments now as work tools, and they were young and they were strong, well made, and they're easily replaceable, and that was the key, because I have had, you know, a guitar stolen, broken, you know, on aeroplanes and stuff like that, accidents, and so you certainly have to do the smart thing, I think, and lock them away safely, you know, and replace them with something that really is, you know, really disposable. But as I say, as time goes on, you start to, instead of working with what you've actually got, like I did with my first Flying V, you know, I loved it, and I loved it so much that I worked with it. I didn't think the controls were in a very convenient place. You know, there was things about the guitar, you know, that weren't specifically, you know, ideal. But as time goes on, you can rectify all of those things, and that's what I did with my own individual designs, to make a super tool, if I could say that, you know, a super duper work tool that does everything that you want and need. It's not particularly putting an emphasis on the sound But certainly the guitar has to be really well made to stand the rigorous touring, on the road, because these individual designs tend to take longer to make, and so they're harder to replace quickly, and that can be quite expensive. For example, my KXK guitars, the last ones that I was playing, I have just 3 of those, and they take quite a long time to manufacture, but they have everything really that I needed really to perform, and I just really, really do love everything about them.
Do you think that the V guitar is a live guitar or a studio guitar? Is it easier to work with live than it is in the studio?
I think it's the same thing. I really do. Yeah, I think that it had to be in the early days. It was the only guitar I had. It had to be. People out there watching and listening guitar players who date back will remember, if you broke a string, you had to stop the show, replace the string and do all of that, and then when the day come when I actually got a second guitar, well, that was just like, it was just a dream come true to have a replacement guitar. So you certainly knew if you broke a string, you'd pick up another instrument, plug it in and carry on. That was fantastic, but like I say, jumping years and years ahead, obviously my new guitars with a Floyd Rose, with a Speedloader system. I don't know really why every guitar in the world doesn't have that system, because it's absolutely incredible. Absolutely amazing. You can obviously change a whole set of strings in about a minute and a half. You don't have to stretch the strings, and it really does. I've played a whole Judas Priest set with one guitar without tuning the guitar, and how ferocious I am with the whammy bar. It's insane, I've played a whole set on several occasions without tuning the instrument. So it's that good.
That's impressive.
It's very impressive.
Because when I have tried to play with Floyd Rose, it always got messed up.
Yeah.
The tuning, and if you lost a string, the whole guitar was break.
But so the Speedloader, the only thing that's in play is the length of the string, and that's it. Obviously, there's no windings, there's no clamp downs. It just slots in there, and it really is that good.
Is that your design?
No, the Floyd Rose came out with the Speedloader system some years ago, and they actually made a guitar. They made a system for the Strat scale and for like the Gibson scale, which is obviously that much different. So they made the 2 systems, but they did actually make a Floyd Rose guitar, which was a Strat kind of scale and shape. I've never played one myself, with the system, so you could buy the guitar and the system all in one, and it was reasonably affordable. But that system that they fitted to those guitars wasn't as it was kind of that much more inferior to the Pro one that was made in Germany, I believe, which is the one that I have fitted. Obviously to make it more affordable, the guitar and the system, the component parts weren't quite as well manufactured, but more suitable to the beginner or intermediate player. But the professional system is spot on.
Why do you think that the flying V has become a trademark for so many guitar players, especially rock stars as yourself, all over the world?
Well, I think that it's just one of those things. It came out, I think, from the Gibson factories because people, whether it was an experiment or whether, you know, it probably was an experimental thing to start with. And let's face it, Gibson and other manufacturers came up with an awful lot of different shapes. Gibson certainly did through the 60s. Even the reverse V, you know, was way back. And of course they had the Firebirds, they had all sorts of shapes. So whoever it was that came up with the V shape probably thought, let's try it and see if it's successful and see if it'll catch on. And it wasn't that successful, and because of the cost of it as well, it was expensive. But players, as I've mentioned and named, you know, did have the guitars and played the guitars, and over a period of time, you know, Gibson did another run, and they and more after that, and eventually, I think as the music trends change from the blues, even though there's some great blues players playing the Flying Vs, not that many compared to the Les Pauls, you know, and guitars like that. So I think the more we moved through the evolutionary scale of music as we know it today, and for me it's quite easy to, because I lived through it, from blues to progressive blues, to rock, progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal. Then you've got all the rest, thrash metal, death metal, speed metal, and that evolution. I think the more the music went a bit more hard edge, you know, then I think the look went with it. So even if it wasn't the traditional Flying V that was really that appealing to start with, the younger musicians certainly liked what the manufacturers were coming up, which was the sharper look Flying V, you know. And I myself, I went through a similar sort of thing where that started to look quite appealing to me as we went through the decades, you know, especially through the to the Ripper years, we call them, you know, with Jugulator and Demolition, where, you know, I think everything that we were doing had that, you know, the appeal was to have that bit more sharp razor edge look and feel. It was pretty good. But as I said, turning the clock back, I think that if I could have played my original Flying Vs for the whole of my career, I think I just would have done that. But because you move on to things that don't have so much of a value, even though they're great guitars, you know, then there's no reason not to change and to try different things, you know.
As a musician, how did you manage to be evolutionary and still stay original with your music and your image? And, you know, heavy metal scene today is quite different from heavy metal scene 25 years ago.
Yeah.
How did you manage to stay original?
Well, in the music, you mean?
Yeah.
In the music.
As
Yeah.
As the image as a guitar player, Judas Priest, as KK Downing. You know.
Yeah, I think that I was quite happy when when we eventually achieved, because I think since the 60s I was always thinking that there was, but a band. I was always thinking there was a way forward to fill a gap that wasn't there, because I felt frustrated. There are a lot of good bands around, and I love listening to them, Sabbath and everybody, but it wasn't really fulfilling everything that was already infused in me from seeing, let's say, Hendrix, and I saw him quite a few times. The elements that he had, musically and visually and everything, wasn't actually in any other band in the world. And so that's what I was always aspiring to try to achieve. But in my own way, and in the band's own way, in the late 70s, certainly for British Steel, when the look eventually consolidated itself, where all of the band were in leather and studs, and the band was uniform, as a metal band. I think that when that happened, I just wanted to stay there forever. I didn't really want to go anywhere else. I didn't want anything to change,
Your identity somehow.
Yeah, I thought the goal had been achieved, and also, with a lot of the music, the goal, not with every song, not with every album, but it was enough of it there to satisfy me. I think that 76, 77, I started to wear, some leather and studs, but to start with, it was just me and then Rob, and eventually it came about, and when the band had its look, and I don't think that we ever really did the change. Judas Priest never really changed from that. There was no reason to, because it's what people liked, and it's what people copied and followed, a lot of people, which is great. And so with the look and the music and everything, the only thing we had to do was keep writing songs. Keep on writing the songs. The image, the sound, everything was there, the members and everything. So that was the only thing we had to work hard at, really, to stay original, was keep writing the songs. And that's the hardest part, and I feel that now I think that, and because you can only get so much blood out of a stone, and lots of people might think, and I think about it all the time, bands from my era were with the lucky ones, because we can write riffs like this, but people can't now because there's been that many variations. It's difficult to songwrite now, especially good, archetypal metal songs, and so I do feel, and I said to the band, really, I felt kind of the same. My last, the gigs that I was doing, and the last, and a lot of people probably don't understand or quite get Nostradamus, but it was great for us. It was great for us to express, and to exhibit what we could actually do as musicians, and also it was something original, and I love it, but I know it's the downfall of Nostradamus was probably the one thing that I actually thought naively was going to be the best thing about Nostradamus, and that is the fact that I wanted to take people back to how it used to be years ago, when you had a big concept album, and like when I first got Electric Ladyland, for example, we used to go in our bedroom, close the curtains, put the headphones on, and just disappear into a world for however longer it took to get through the album, and just absorb it and just be at one with it. And I wanted people to experience Nostradamus like that, you know, to take them on a musical landscape, this journey. But unfortunately, things have moved on, people's attention span. You know, lots of people give things one listen, and they don't have it, you know, a mind to listen to albums like we used to do, because music was all we had. But that's fine, because it's all we wanted, because we were happy. You know, waiting months for a vinyl to come out, and going to the shop and waiting in a long queue, and rushing home with it and playing it till it was half worn out, you know. And we loved that. You know, we didn't have the computers, we didn't have a lot of other things, but music was, you know, the big. Music still is a massive. Music still is. Music is a language, a universal language. Of course, it is, and it's a big social. It's a big social glue that brings a lot of people together. I mean, I could talk all night about the subject, really, because the thing is, there's a lot of great benefits that the internet has brought in respect to music, and it has, hasn't it? It really has. And the thing is, as much as it's been the downfall of music as we knew it for so long, and the industry, and how difficult it's made things for new bands, you know, to get a leg up and to enter into the industry. But the thing is, it is a saviour in a lot of ways, because it gets music out there that people wouldn't ordinarily see or listen to or experience. And it is kind of, the internet will and is already possibly a musical museum that people can go to any day or any night, and look through the archives, you know, look back through the decades of bands that, you know, at least they can get to see wonderful footage of, you know, that they would never, ever have seen in their lives, most likely. There's a wonderful piece of footage that's just come out of us. I think I said on my website in 1976 at Reading Festival. Somebody took that on a reel and has posted it up there. How wonderful is that for everybody to see? But I myself, I love going back and looking at some great gigs of bands that, you know, that I was a big fan of, you know, Stan Webb, Chicken Shack, playing, you know, a club somewhere in Dortmund, you know, and it's great. You can be at that gig. So thanks to the internet for that and everything about it. But in reality, on the ground, you know, it's tough, obviously, for younger musicians to enter into the industry. And everything, as I was saying before, has got kind of tougher, songwriting, and, you know, it's not difficult now to get a great guitar sound. You know, you can pop down to a shop and everybody's got one, so that's great. Equipment's really quite affordable. There's some great stuff on there. Everybody can make some great demos and recordings in their toilet or bedroom. There's lots of good things, but getting the live musician out of the home and onto the stage and onto, you know, a well-recorded CD, for example, has proved to be extremely difficult. And that is the task ahead for the years to come.
Actually, you answered some of the questions I would have asked you about. That's great, thank you. If you could choose, what should be your legacy as a musician?
I think that I'm quite happy. I think that it starts with the band. I think in years to come, if people can actually say, who was the band, if you could name one really true blue heavy metal band, that was probably most influential, in look and everything that we did. I would like people to say Judas Priest, because of all of the ingredients with the twin guitar effect, killer vocals, I mean, obviously, great rhythm section, the leather, the studs, the first band to do a lot of things, I think, and and I think the repertoire, the legacy of the songs and the albums, I think and all of those components and ingredients, I'd like to think people would cite Judas Priest.
They blew up the amplifier. They pulled over with the gasoline, and they put a match on it, and they blew up the glasses of the paint beside the amps.
Oh,
What's
yeah.
the most crazy thing you did?
I don't know about that. I mean, I was always thinking that let Rob go and do the crazy shit, he's out there with two hands, I'm there with an instrument, and so I'm kind of always having to produce some music or holding it together. So obviously we had a lot of crazy effects and stunts and things that we did, that were pretty dangerous, precarious. But that was it, really. I never wanted to blow up any of my amps or anything. I just wanted to make sure that they were always in good condition. But they were always in good condition.
You never seen that scene with Richard Blackmore blew up his amp at the Rainbow Festival?
No, I can remember when we opened up for Rainbow, 1981 in Donington. I can remember that they blew half of our speakers up. They were doing some tests, doing something on the stage. But anyway, it was all fixed by the time we went on. But I heard this bang, bang like that, and it was like, God only knows what they did, but it really affected quite a lot of our speakers. The road crew had to replace most of them before we could actually play. They must have just gone like that, So I don't know what they were doing, but
if you combine the first albums that you made and the last album in that period as a guitar player, what is the first thing that comes in mind that you have developed through your career as a guitar player? The sound, the composing,
I think that I think I must say that I think kind of in an unselfish way, I think having two guitar players in the band, I think that neither myself or Glenn were trying to push ourselves forward as being, a Van Halen or a Hendrix or a Malmsteen, or, that type. We really were proud of, I think, of our songwriting skills. The song's crucially important. And I think that we were proud of all the components that we would put into a song, with trade-off solos and all of that kind of stuff. We did and proudly worked together as a guitar duo, a unit, and I guess that was always our strength. But I think that myself and Glenn, obviously, as time went on, we kept on improving, I believe, as players, And hopefully, even today, I think I'm a better guitar player today than people have ever seen me on a stage. I think, 5 years, I think it was November 2010, I walked off a stage in Japan and haven't been on one since. But I like to think I'm a better guitar player today I mean, I don't practice all the time. I pick the guitar up, but I'm always learning, and and there's lots to learn. I mean, we've got this thing now with hexatonic scales. Has it always been around? Did I ever hear about it? Don't think so. But recently, I'm aware of hexatonic, and which is essentially a 6-note scale. So a blues scale, for example, could be hexatonic. But I've just found a pretty neat one where you just have you just utilize, well, with a pentatonic scale, if you just utilize the 2nd or 9th note in the pentatonic, gives you 6 notes. It's a pretty neat scale. If you guys want to try it out. So if you're in E minor, you just want to add the F sharp throughout the pentatonic scale. Try it. It does make a big difference just to the just one note. Completely different feel. It's kind of fun. But anyway, am I a bit late catching on with all of the whiz? I'm sure I probably am. But anyway, I've only just made these few discoveries. But there are other hexatonic scales which are pretty neat as well, even though they kind of verge more into a jazz feel. They're kind of interesting to experiment with.
Okay, Mr. Downing. Last question, and then we are finished. Then we have a wrap. What now? What are your plans now?
No particular.
Play golf and have
No. People think that. I mean, there's hardly a day goes by where I don't involve myself in music in one way or another. And I really do. And it's true. I do a lot of interviews, radios, magazines, and stuff like that. Try to help some musicians. I do. I go to concerts. I play the guitar. And for me, I'm still the same as I always was. Except for the fact that I've got an awareness now. I'm 64. I've got an awareness now that time's getting, shorter. So I have to consider a lot of other things as well. And it gets to be that way, where there's a lot of things I don't do now that I would have done no problem at all. Time consuming, I would have done it, in the past. I've got some guitars that really need some work. It would be fun to have time to be able to strip them down, clean everything up, put them all back. I don't do any of that, as much as I would enjoy doing it, because time is too short now. If it takes half a day to do something like that, maybe more. But there's lots of things, consciously or subconsciously, that creep into your mind thought, and I think that's where I was with the band. I didn't really want to record anymore. I didn't really think that... I thought the legacy of Priest was more than enough to... There's more than enough there to go out, and give to the fans. We could create a new set list every couple of months if we wanted to, and go out there. Didn't really want to lock myself in a studio for a few more years, because I've done it so many times, and I think that there's nothing more to prove. And I think it gets harder. There's no doubt in my mind it gets harder to reproduce another classic or masterpiece album as time goes on, because you've got such... As time goes on, the more revered and more classic the older stuff becomes, and it becomes even harder to keep up the standard of even the oldest records. Even Judas Priest's first album, if I listen to that, I'm thinking, shit, I wish I could write songs like, if I could write songs like that now and record them with today's everything, it'd be a great album. I'm kind of too jealous of what I've already done and achieved, to try to do it again. It's not that difficult because you were in a different place and in a different time, and decades, move on. And it's hard to put yourself in writing a 70s album or an 80s album, in the year that we are, because we move on, our mindsets go into a different place. Whereas before, in the 60s or 70s, we would write stuff that were more simple, if that's, it's not an unkind word. What I mean, musically, it was more stripped back, but sometimes more is less. So those few notes were very, very meaningful at the time. Would they be now? I don't know. I'm not sure, But when you listen to, let's say, some of the classic, War Pigs, whatever, some classic, Black Sabbath riffs, for example, you could write them at the time and they were powerful, they were big, they were like a killing machine of a riff, and it meant a lot to people. Few notes, but the meaning was strong. It meant it meant a lot to us out there as youngsters, and music listeners. Would it have the same effect today? I don't know. That's why everything gets more intense, a lot more notes. It doesn't sound like I'm a musician talking about more notes and fewer notes. But in layman's terms, that's kind of the way that I see it, really. And the design is now to create a lot more intense, musically intense pieces to listen to. And it's kind of harder to listen to in a way, and maybe not so meaningful as the simpler riffs, and I'm talking Smoke on the Water, whatever it is. And I'm not, everybody would cite that riff, but it comes on and it's still as meaningful today. But you can listen to some new stuff that people write and create, and it doesn't kind of have the same emotions,
So you mean a good riff, a simple riff, and a good song will always be a good song, no matter what.
Yeah, I
As
mean,
long as it has.
when I first heard Headless Cross, the riff, I went, I love it. And then I saw the video with Tony Martin, came on the television. I love it, But that simplicity, that was very meaningful, and the emotions behind the man, and all of that, all of the emotions that we have gone through, and people do go through with a life. We as musicians in the recording studio, we'd lived our life, and a lot of those emotions, where people, die, you lose people, you fall in love, you fall out, all of that. So that was very meaningful, to me as an individual, being a part of that that whole epic, album. So I still think there's some great riffs, great guitar playing, lots of great ingredients, within that album, and I'm hopeful that eventually, like albums we had released in the past that weren't successful on release, including Painkiller, wasn't an instant success. The first time it came out wasn't an instant success, because Judas Priest, we'd actually, Scott Travers became on board, so allowed us to do faster, more, and do musical things. It was a bit of a diversification for Judas Priest, and it wasn't an instantly what people warmed to, but as time went on, now people say it's, probably the best Priest album. But I'm hopeful that Nostradamus, at some point, you know, hopefully I'll still be here, to see it enjoy, you know, people to look back at that, revisit and see what it was all about, really. No problem, you guys. Thanks for making the journey. If there's anything else you think of, you can always get me on the phone. You've got my numbers. You got my number. Anything else, I'll talk it over the phone. It's not a problem.